Right. So, in this video, let us try to understand what is the debate around privatization, why privatization is often attacked, criticized, why privatization is not taken as a positive step. So, whenever government announces its policy for disinvestment, is that is welcomed with virulent attack on government's initiatives for disinvestment, which is termed as privatization. All kinds of disinvestments generally are branded as privatization, and privatization has been, you know, set up in people's mind that something that is disastrous for people, anti-people. So even if the disinvestment is 5%, 2%, 10%, this is automatically termed as privatization, and privatization has been inculcated as a negative value. The governments which are failed governments, the governments which are inefficient government, they only choose. I mean, the governments which are anti-people governments, they choose privatization. This is the scenario. Now let us try to understand the reality of what is termed as privatization. So disinvestment, it's basically disinvestment. So whenever government announces disinvestment, now what has happened? Of late, governments have, especially in India, every year government of India has a disinvestment target. Every year, in the very beginning of the financial year, a disinvestment target is set that has to be achieved by the end of the financial year. Although never in history the target has been achieved, but government always every year sets the target. This target is sometime set as 50,000 crore per annum, sometime 75,000 crore per annum, but hardly it has ever been realized. So maximum disinvestment in 1 year that has been achieved has been 15,000 crore. Okay. So now the question is, why disinvestment? First, what is disinvestment? So the definition of disinvestment is that when government sells its shares in public sector undertakings, right? So the selling of shares may be on different of different types. There may be strategic sale, there may be 5% sale, there may be 20% sale, etc., etc. So the governments make disinvestment because of losses. So the first set of disinvestments were made because of loss-making PSUs. So the idea was to sell the loss-making PSUs, which had become a big burden on the public finance of government of India. So loss-making PSUs, when they were disinvested, then there are not much criticism. They are also criticized. The people, especially the hard-trained people in socialism, they believe that even the government must incur the losses, but never it should disinvest. It should not sell off its shares. It should not. I mean, this is taken as setting off socialistic responsibility, welfareist responsibility. It means that government is expected to continue do welfare even if it is in losses, even if it incurs heavy losses in PSUs. So that is one thing. Disinvesting loss making PSUs, that is one thing. But it has often happened, and especially in the second phase of disinvestment, the governments have been disinvesting not only the loss making PSUs but also the profit making PSUs. Now, this is more vehemently criticized. Why to disinvest? Why to sell off the shares to private players where government is already making profit? So somehow these people can digest that, okay, you can sell the loss-making PSUs shares, But why to sell the shares of profit making, right? So government of India has adopted various category of disinvestment model, but the most popular famous model has been strategic sale. Strategic sale means the candidates for the sale of government shares are selected according to governmental priorities, and it is not that they are thrown away to anyone. So not everyone has the chance to purchase the government share. So government fix the criteria to decide who are the private players to whom the government's share to be sold. So very carefully those private partners are selected. So strategic sales. Generally, foreign players are excluded from the sale of government shares in strategic sales. But now, in last 4 5 years, government has announced that we will sell the shares of Maharatnas also. Maharatnas are the companies which make the profit per annum up to 3,000 crore, and they have been making profit in last 3 years up to 3,000 crore. So, like ONGC, IOC, etc. So government has announced to sell its share not only in loss-making PSUs but also in profit-making PSUs. Now this becomes a matter of strong criticism. So now next topic is why governments are forced to, or why governments choose to sell their shares in PSUs. So in case of loss-making PSU, it's very clear that government wants to come out of losses, right? So government wants to give it to a company, private company, which can turn this loss-making company into a profit-making company. So that is one thing. And the money that is earned by selling the PSU's shares, that is used for various purposes. So different governments have different objectives, right? So most of this proceeds which are received by selling the shares, they are used in budgetary schemes, and they are also used for social welfare, and then they are also used for infrastructure building. A new investment fund has been created where the proceeds from the sale of government shares, I mean PSU, government share in PSUs, they are kept under investment fund, and the proceeds from investment fund are utilized for funding and financing the NSTP projects, infrastructure projects, various other infrastructure projects can be used for Sagarmala project, SEZ, etc. Government SEZ. And then so from time to time the government keeps on changing the money, I mean the money where it has to be used. The UPA too decided that the proceeds from sale of disinvestment shall be used for meeting the social objectives of the government. So disinvestment was linked with the social objectives which are enshrined in constitution. Even otherwise, every government, even if we spend it on infrastructure, that is also social objective. But different governments have different idea of what actually means social justice. So some government can decide that social objective means only giving money to poor people, minority, etc., etc. That is one meaning of social objective. But when we spend on physical infrastructure, that is also social objective, meeting the social objective. Now the larger question is why the governments decide to sell PSUs. So in India, PSUs were given the primary importance in independent India's economic policy under mixed economic system, which came from Government of India Industrial Policy 1948 and Government of India Industrial Policy 1956. 90% of the economy was kept under state, and private sector was allowed. It's not that private sector was not allowed, but private sector was allowed in limited area with limited operations and under heavy governmental control under MRTP Act, etc., etc., FERA Act. So they had to work under very restrictive acts like MRTP Act and FERA Act 1969. And secondly, the private sectors were expected to work as complementary to public sector. So overall, the space for private sector was very limited till 1991. Now the question is, the India almost started off as a socialist country. We had 90% of our economic activities reserved for public sector. Now the question is, what happened? Why did we start? Why did we think of disinvestment that started in 1991? That was started by the government which shared the same ideology which had worked since 1950 or after independence. So it was Congress Party of India, same Congress Party. But in 1991, the government was forced to adopt a very wide scale disinvestment policy. So now the question is, why in 1991 government decided to choose disinvestment? The answer is very difficult. It's very harsh. Answer is that the PSUs, two-thirds of them had become a net burden on government and public finance, right? So now the question is, why PSUs had become defunct and loss-making? So the answer is, why disinvestment was started? It was started because PSUs had become defunct, PSUs had become loss-making. Okay, right? So when you have loss-making PSUs, then not only your money is, your investment is locked, but also now you need to run those PSUs by injecting further fiscal stimulus. So we are feeding the PSUs which are constantly and year after year making losses. It is like feeding the feeding the people who are inefficient, who are sick and almost determined to die. Now the question is, why PSU reached this destination? PSUs became defunct, inefficient, loss making, bankrupt in some cases. It's all because, in what neoliberalism they call it as, government cannot, or what Friedman says, that government is the worst business performer. Governments are not designed to do the business. Even if we don't choose this neoliberalist conclusion, so we cannot avoid this conclusion that in India, in last 40 years, PSUs had become net loss making. Two-thirds of them were loss making. So the one reason why did they become loss making is very clear, that they were managed by bureaucracy, Indian bureaucracy, which are designed to become work like rule enforcing. So the agency which has been trained and created for the purpose of coercive action, regulation, etc. This body is not trained to run the business. Neither do they have that entrepreneurial skill or training imparted to them. The training which is given to them, that's not adequate to run the businesses, the big businesses. So it was bureaucracy which had no inclination towards running government PSUs successfully on the principles of market, on the principles of competition, and then the bureaucracy itself had to work under the governments which were dangerously, I mean, what well, I mean, dangerously. They had no economic understanding. They just wanted to use these resources for their political purpose. So appointments were made on the basis of nepotism. Management of PSUs were interfered politically. So it was, I mean, the business was run according to politics. So when politics governs the business, this is bound to fail. So this was the main reason. Bureaucratic inefficiency. Civil services are not designed to, I mean, if we give them training properly, if they are properly trained to run the businesses, to run the industry, companies on market principle, competitive principle, then certainly they can manage it no problem. But unfortunately, in India, civil services has not been created, has neither been created nor been trained to run the businesses on the principle of trade, commerce, competition, etc., global competition. But they were not trained for this. Uh, Bureaucracy was also casteist. The bureaucrats came from certain caste where exercising power was expected in society. It was totally messed up. The entire affairs was messed up, and this is what made PSUs loss making. So this was the beginning of disinvestment of loss making PSUs. Many other things were related to it. PSUs were burdened, rather overburdened, with the functions which were non-commercial and non-entrepreneurial in nature. For example, NTPC was asked to develop townships. So when PSUs are overburdened with political and non-commercial objectives to develop the township, to provide the world-class, what health and educational facilities for their employees, then there is no consideration of what profitability. So profitability was never the principle for running. So PSUs, if they made profit, it was not because of high level of professionalism based on commercial principle. It was just an accident. Political leadership and bureaucracies, they I mean they did not intend to run them on the same principle as private corporates are run. Private corporates have their own problem. There is too much unethical principles, practices. But in public sector, there are other problems: nepotism, inefficiency, lack of enterprise, lack of entrepreneurship amongst bureaucrats. Bureaucrats think that they are mainly for doing the rule work, paperwork, etc. Or there is no incentive. There is no additional incentive for taking risk. Risk taking ability is the main feature of entrepreneurialism. But bureaucrat is not a risk taker. He is interested only in saving his own job, getting his own salary. So entrepreneurialism must be there to run a business successfully, but that is missing in both our political leaders as well as the bureaucrats who ran the PSUs. Now, second phase is of disinvestment is why to disinvest the profit-making PSUs. Now, the question is, investment has a economic cost. Every investment has an economic cost. If you invest your capital in one business, then you must compare whether the same capital, if invested in another business, then what profit return would have been earned. So there is a proportionate sense of proportion. If capital X invested in business A earns a profit of 10%. On the other hand, there is another business where the same capital, if invested in business B, then there is a chance it can earn 20% profit, right? The governments also must be enterprising, entrepreneurial governments, entrepreneurial state, because a state can fulfill its welfarist obligation only when it has money. So economic wisdom necessitates that less productive resources, capital resource or land resource or labor resource, whatever is less productive must be shifted to a high productivity sector. or high productivity business. So all individuals, all enterprises, government also, they must look for the opportunities. If they have better chances of earning more profit, then the investment from a less profitable business should be shifted to more profitable business. So if government earns a profit, I mean, if ONGC earns a profit of say 15% per annum, right? Now, by selling 10% stake in ONGC, if government can invest the same money into another business where the government has the chance to receive the dividend of 20%, then what should stop this government? Why government should not be profit oriented? Why only private sectors must be of profit oriented? Now, it's not being suggested that government in all its decision and all its function must always be guided only by profit. No, but but the business, I mean, the economic activities, the basic purpose of economic activity is to maximize the profit. So why to keep invested in an area where there is chance of lesser profitability? Right? Lesser productivity. So, economic wisdom suggests that all resources, whether they are natural resources or financial resources or human resources, they must be shifted from less productive or non productive sector or business to high productive sector or to highly profitable sectors or businesses. So this is why governments also set the target every year to earn to generate some income from disinvestment that is included in income of government, that is used for various purposes, that is used for funding some very important infrastructure projects like NHTP, Bharatmala, Sagarmala, CEZ, Coastal Economic Zone. There are many critical infrastructural projects underway which needs funding. So how to fund them? Government has to generate. So selling 5%, 10% stake in profit making PSUs is not a crime. It's an economic wisdom, provided it is guided by the idea of shifting the resource from less productive sector to high productive sector. If we are disinvesting only for meeting governmental expenditure, paying bureaucrats and paying salaries and pensions to staff, then this is bad use of disinvested money. So if disinvested money can be used for more productive purposes and more profitable purposes, then why not? It must be welcome. That's it.